Welcome to Slow Down to Speed Up. I'm Brian Wang, an executive coach who helps startup founders grow by working through their biggest challenges. On this show, I sit down with founders for a one-time coaching session where you will hear things my guests never say elsewhere because they're working through real-life, current leadership issues. When we struggle, we're often tempted to find a quick solution, and sometimes that's all we need. But when we're finding ourselves stuck in those really tricky, recurring problems, that's when it's time to slow down. Because breaking through to the next level requires us to examine what patterns may be holding us back and what new perspective might be called for. I ask everyone who comes here to dig deep and trust that through this work, they will discover something new about themselves and how to move forward with their business. I hope you find something valuable in what you hear today for your own journey. Today we're speaking with Danielle Lumetta, who is going through something that every founder fears, yet many will have to experience, which is shutting down their company. Danielle is eager to move forward without making the mistake of fusing her life with her work. Yet there's an anxiety about whether or not she can actually pull that off. I help her zoom out and explore what fulfillment really means to her. And from that place, she starts to trust herself more, to make choices that are aligned with her values. Hey Danielle, good to see you.
Hi, Brian. Good to see you.
It's been a while. It's so good to see your face.
Yours too.
Yeah. So just for us to dive right in, what are you bringing in today and what is it that you want to really work on right now?
Yeah. So as you know, me and my two co-founders made the decision to wind down my startup before noon. And when we talked last, I was in Europe trying to work through those emotions and came back to San Francisco and finally kind of put pen to paper and wrote all the notes. And I finally got to the end of the communications plan of letting everyone know that we're winding down, which, I mean, on the one hand, feels incredibly relieving. It's taking a little bit of that weight of the decision and just all the notes that you keep getting from people about what's going on off my shoulders. But on the other hand, it's hard to deal with, I would say, like the last 5 to 10% of the grief while also wanting to move forward. And so part of me is like, am I trying to push myself forward too quickly? Or is this just part of the process? Or what does it mean to grieve but also move forward? I guess is what I'm grappling with.
Yeah, that last question. Woof. Okay.
Yeah.
What does it mean to grieve and also push yourself forward? Yeah, that's an interesting one. So let me just reflect back a little bit. So, okay, you're a founder, and you are in the middle of a really tough situation, one that most founders never want to see themselves in, but realistically, most founders will find themselves in, right? So you just got done kind of announcing to the world in public, kind of the status of before noon and it coming to an end, and it sounds like, there's some burden lifted for you, yet there's also a lot of heavy emotions I hear for you, just that you're sort of with, and you're still in the middle of processing. And so it almost sounds like there's a split for you. There's like, on one hand, some impulse or desire to want to move forward, to want to find out like what's the next chapter. And at the same time, there's some part of you that's like, wait, I just spent all this time and energy, blood, sweat, and tears on this thing, and there's still some stuff for me to feel through, and maybe even let go of, before I'm ready to move on. I'm just curious how that reflection is landing for you.
Yeah, I mean, 1000%. I did your pre-coaching session questions. I answered them before this call, and I think what came out is, if I look at the past year, we went from pivoting the company through going through an accelerator to launching a new iteration of the company in 3 months, to fundraising, to not being able to fundraise as much as we wanted, so evaluating different options for the company, to having the conversation with my co-founders about what we wanted to do, and ultimately deciding to wind down. So there's a lot of like momentum and disappointment and stuff in that.
Yeah.
And I think it's unrealistic for me to think that I just got over it by one Europe trip in a month.
Yeah.
And
right.
There's parts of it still, I mean, even at its simplest, like me and my co-founders used to talk every day. And
Yeah.
now we talk once or twice a month as we just figure out the wind down of the process,
Yeah.
which is good. I think it's good to have some distance as we each grieve separately, but that's just a massive change in how I would run my day and my schedule. And I think something as simple as that shows like change can be grief and grief can be change. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, what came up for me just now is you were talking about all the twists and turns of navigating the startup and trying to make it work. So there's this like persistent, consistent push to, you know, go around obstacles and find solutions and keep going. There's this energy of like, let's keep going. Um, I almost imagine you're just driving down a highway and you're turning around obstacles. And now it's like the ride has stopped. And so that's like a sudden state change,
Yeah.
right? And and just on a basic level, you're not used to that. You're not used to the pause, even though that's where you find yourself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I find myself doing is now like filling in all my spare time with either busy work or like urgency in finding the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So just as you're reflecting on that, like I want to go back to that question of you and I coming into this conversation. So you're noticing yourself like, I got to do this, I got to do that. Let me find the next thing. And like,
Yeah.
I guess I detect that on some level. You're like, I'm not sure. Like that impulse is where I want to be, but I don't want to assume. So I'm curious, just as you're just starting to process this a little bit, like,
Mm-hmm.
where is it that you want to go here? Just in our conversation.
I think that as I say this out loud, I realize there's a bit of fear that I'm holding on to of
Hmm.
going into this next chapter, fearful of it failing again, whatever this
Uh,
next chapter is. Um, but also a little bit of fear of replicating the same patterns.
yeah.
It's funny I say this out loud because it sounds exactly like a breakup where you're in this relationship with
Sure.
someone for
Yeah.
4 years and then you break up and you find yourself at this point of like, I'm ready to move forward, but I'm fearful of recreating the same patterns or like failing again in the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what it feels like. But what's different about this is it's my career.
Right.
Versus just, I mean, not just, but versus a partner. It's different.
Well, it's different, but it's in some ways it's no less personal than being in a romantic relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
so many of us fuse our identity and our self-worth with our career, right? And so in the letting go of this chapter, right, there's a rupture, right? And there's this pain and like you said, there's also the awareness that, there are certain things that I did that I don't want to repeat. I don't want to replicate. And and associated with that is also some fear that that's going to happen. So if I'm tracking you correctly, Danielle, it sounds like we're sort of touching this thing. It's like, okay, you notice there were some things that happened this go around. Yes, failure, right? Like we could just like say that in a broad sense, but like there's certain things about this experience that you're really hoping not to repeat the next time,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some worry that that will happen, that it will end up happening. Yeah.
I would say both from this past experience, but also from my corporate life before that.
Okay. Yeah.
Because there were elements of what I experienced in corporate that obviously drove me to start my own startup.
Yeah.
And so I'm fearful a little bit of getting back into that same place that I left.
Like you were running from something from your corporate job, which led you to before noon, and
To
you don't
some
want to
extent.
you don't want to
Yeah,
be running away from something again. Is that kind of the idea?
a little bit. I mean, I think there were elements of corporate that I did not identify with and or appreciate that in starting before noon wanted to make sure I exemplified the polar opposite.
Uh-huh.
And so going back potentially into a corporate role or some semblance of a corporate role, how do I make sure I don't end up in as much of a burnt out, unhappy space as I was when I left my previous corporate job?
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So you're like you're familiar with what it's like to be unhappy in a corporate role, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
possible next step for you.
Yeah.
And you don't want to revisit that.
Yeah.
So
So I guess it's the
yeah,
fear
go ahead.
in three things. It's
Yeah.
fear in taking patterns from my old work life and bringing them forward. Um, I guess it's fear of failure again. Failure, we'll say in this term, just the outcome that I did not want to happen.
Right.
Um, and then I think there is a little bit of fear of like fear around worthiness of if I didn't make this big thing happen in the way I wanted to, who's to say that I'm worthy enough to join or be a part of this next thing that I'm ready to move on to? I would say that's only probably about 5%, but there is this inherent like question of worthiness of
Yeah.
am I good enough?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because that what you're touching is sort of a biggie, but you're saying
Yeah.
it's like only 5% of like what you're sort of working with or present to right now. So what's the other, 95% right now?
I think that's where I'm struggling. I don't know. I just feel like excited but fearful.
Yeah.
And I don't know if to like push myself forward and just get over it or eventually it'll just go away or if I need to give this time of grieving more time than I'm willing to give it.
Yeah. So there's some element of like, what should I do now? What's the right thing for me to do right
Yeah.
now? Yeah.
Mhm.
D- I don't know if we'll get into it, but I'm wondering if maybe you can share like a specific example of something that you're trying not to repeat. Like, you sort of touched on burnout and patterns, but I'm wondering if there's like a specific thing that you had in mind there.
So one of the kind of work habits I brought in from consulting and I had to work through with before noon, but being a startup, I don't think I worked through it as much as I should have. Um, is just like orienting my life around work, where I'm
Hmm.
willing to put work above everything and anything.
Yeah.
And it's normal for me to work like 80-hour work weeks,
Right.
which was different when I was in consulting and then I shifted over to before noon and it's your own thing. So it's like your heart and your soul.
Right.
And I had this realization that in this next chapter of my life, I want to feel fulfilled in my work, but I also want to feel fulfilled in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't think I know how to strike that balance. Because prior to this, whenever I love something that I'm working on, I just jump in 2 feet first and don't look back. So that's one that I'm a little bit apprehensive about, especially as I start to have conversations about roles
Yeah.
of how do I set that boundary
Yeah.
of work that I love, but I don't want to give up the love, like my life as well, in order to like focus on this work that I love.
Yeah. Yeah, so I love that you brought in the word boundary. There's a few different ways we can play with that, so maybe we'll get back to it. But what I hear is that in your mind, there's some distinction between feeling fulfilled in your work and feeling fulfilled in your life. Um, of course, they interact with each other, but it's you're saying work isn't all of your life because if it
Mm-hmm.
were, and you were feeling fulfilled in your work, then like there's some logic to this where like my life is fulfilled, but that sounds like that's not the case. So just to spend some time on that for a moment, what does it mean for you to feel fulfilled in your life?
That's a good question. Nurturing healthy relationships with the people that I love, so friends and family, and also my partner. Like, I don't feel like I showed up as the best partner this past year, and
Hmm.
being able to show up for him and be more supportive for him is important to me.
Yeah.
Um, Leaving time for other creative pursuits. Like, I love
Hmm.
painting, but I never set aside time for that. Or just having the space to play with different things, whether it's going to a dance class or something else.
Yeah.
Um, and then the third is just sleep, like getting enough sleep at its
Right.
most basic.
Yeah. Okay, so relationships and like really fully showing up to them in the way that you want. There's I will say like expression, creative expression, or just like activities that sound like they give you some joy, and then just the basics of sleep and taking care of oneself. Right, you're
Yeah.
a
Working
human
out, having
being.
time to work out.
Right.
Yeah.
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 You have a body that needs to be taken care of. You need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to work out, you need
Yeah.
to do all those things, right? And so is it the case that what you found was you're present to those needs and those desires, um, but you weren't able to fully honor those because you sort of allowed work to suck you in?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think I know what it looks like to not allow it to suck me in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's play with that then. Let's play with that.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
what does it look like for you to not allow it to suck you in? That's a great question, or just a great thing to ponder. So let's just engage with our imagination on that for a second,
Mm-hmm.
Danielle. So you're already talking to some folks, right? You said kind of having the boundary or holding the boundary. So in my mind, what I'm hearing is there's a certain aspects of your life that you want to protect and to honor, right? And that's what the boundary's for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if you can imagine a scenario where perhaps that boundary would get challenged, right? So maybe it's like in some of these conversations right now, you're already imagining that happening, but like I'm wondering what's coming
Yeah.
up for you.
Um, let's see. I mean, the first way I'm trying to get around it is just by doing contracting work versus like a full-time role.
Okay.
Um,
Getting around what exactly?
around like the pressure to constantly perform
Mm,
and never be able to turn off.
mm. So contracting sort of gives you some flexibility to turn it on and off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's not a I still remain my own boss, which I do like. And you have clients, but they're not your
Mm,
boss. Um, one of one of my friends does this thing when he gets new roles where he sends out a ways of working document,
mm-hmm.
and it just gives his new team an idea of how he likes to work. And at first I was like, oh, that seems a little overkill, but it may be a good ground set just to say this is what to expect when we engage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the third is just being really clear when I'm having these conversations about how I like to work and where I'm willing to flex and where I'm not willing to flex.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to work weekends anymore.
Right.
However, I want to work like baseline 40 hours. If I need to like up that a little bit, then because of something urgent, then sure, but I'm not going to like work over that
Mm-hmm.
constantly like I
Mm-hmm.
used to.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
a people pleaser, so these are hard conversations.
I think you're great. So I think you're already leading us into the next part.
Yeah.
So okay, you just went and sort of listed out a number of different ways you could start to communicate with people around you. Like, hey, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm not going to do. Here's what I like. Here's what I don't like in terms of the way I work. And you sort of just mentioned, oh, you're a people pleaser. So there's two elements I think coming up for me. One is there's the actually having those explicit expectations set, which I think you were just touching on, right? So there's just
Mm-hmm.
like, how do I even go out and tell people or communicate with people, this is what's important to me?
Yeah.
And then there's a second element around when those things get inevitably challenged, right? It's one thing to say those things; it's another for real life to collide with them.
Yeah.
So it just for you as you're hearing that, maybe they're equal to you, but like, does one of those feel kind of more challenging right now? The idea of like,
Definitely the
yeah,
latter.
okay,
Um, because I can have all the intentions in the world to have more balance or set a boundary,
yeah,
but there's always gray area, and sometimes the gray area can be challenged, which is fine. Like you can shift it a little bit. However, when it gets shifted all the time, which sometimes that gray area shift gives a gateway to,
yeah.
that's when you end up, or I end up in a place where I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't want this. Like, how did I end up here again?
Hmm. How often did that happen with before noon?
I think mostly in the past year, it felt much more frenetic in the past year of there's a ticking time clock and things are not going the way we wanted it to, and like we need to figure this out ASAP. Yeah.
So there's like this urgency.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, we're not going to survive. And
Mm-hmm.
then so there's just like
Cash
the
flow's running
resulting,
out.
right.
Yeah.
And there's like a resulting like frenetic energy that starts to emerge there.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you imagine that something similar might come in with the next chapter, whatever that might be?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, because the two kind of areas that I'm leaning is either working for a later state, like a Series A and beyond startup in product management,
Right.
which that has its own challenges, right? Because it's a startup. Startups are always going to be a little bit crazy. And then the other is doing some consulting work with my old bosses in a contracting scenario.
Right.
And so, yeah, they each bring up, it's kind of funny because they each bring up elements of my past, anyways. Because the startup scenario brings up before noon, the contracting work brings up my life before noon.
Yeah.
So maybe this is just a sign that I need to work through this either way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hard to outrun your past.
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll ask a weird question then. So
Okay.
what are you most running away from then in terms of the stuff that you're working through?
Mm. I don't know. I mean, the word that keeps coming up in my mind is just fear.
Yeah, fear of what?
Fear of the unknown, fear of uncertainty. I think that's basically what's just keeps coming up.
Yeah. See if you can like peek at what's on the other side of that. So your brain is predicting something on the other side of that uncertainty.
I don't think it has another side, and maybe that's the problem. Like it's just blankness.
Hmm. So just as you're like making contact with the fear, well, and let me just ask as we maybe slow down on this a little bit, how does the fear show up in your system? Like where does it sit in your body?
My heart and my chest.
Yeah, so just if you were just to bring your attention,
Feels like anxiety, actually, now that I think about it.
okay, great.
Yeah.
So see if you can just rest your attention on that for a moment. Focus a little bit on that. And then give some voice to it. If it were trying to say something right now.
I think it's like, finally, you recognized me.
So it's been feeling ignored a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, like I don't think I've felt like I was anxious because I have had more time to myself, but I don't think I realized that I could still be anxious while not having as much to do, work-wise, at least.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So stay with it. Okay. So it's like, okay, Danielle, you're recognizing me. Like finally you're recognizing me. So if you're like engaging in some sort of dialogue with it, and let's say you're adopting a curious stance toward it, what is it that you want to know from it? Like, what do you want to ask it?
Well, in our past coaching sessions, it's funny because anxiety is something we work through a lot. Um, and usually you say it means it's there to teach you something, or there's an old lesson that it's trying to have you not replicate. Which I guess then the question is like, what is it trying to teach me? or protect me from? I think that's the question. What is it trying to protect me from?
Okay. Stay with it.
Okay.
Yeah. I see you wondering about it. Like, let's say you're stepping into the anxiety for a moment and speaking. What is it trying to protect you from? What is it working so hard right now to protect you from?
I think it's grief, probably disappointment,
Mm,
um, stress for sure,
sure.
slash burnout. All the things I felt over the last, especially 6 months.
Hmm.
So it's almost like, oh, you finally like are in a good place. Don't go back there type deal.
Mm. So you were, so it's like some part of you is like, oh yeah, we're finally past all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Or you've gotten to the other end of that stuff. Because there's always like a rock bottom and then you start to like climb out of it. Like I feel like I've finally started to climb out of it. And I wonder if it's just fearful of going back to that like rock bottom feeling.
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
that's it.
So it's like a place that I've been, I thought I left, and I don't really want to go back there.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you go back there?
I become and show up as someone that I don't want to show up as. Yeah, I'm just miserable.
Hmm. Yeah. So you have an awareness that you're miserable, you don't show up the way you want when you're kind of in that rock bottom place, and then there's this anxiety that's like, hey, I don't, let's not go back there. We've been climbing our way back from it. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I still hear that the anxiety is working really hard right now though. It's like really it's like telling you like, don't go back there, don't go back there. We know what we
Just
know,
like avert your eyes, don't
we
look
know what
at
that's
it.
like. Yeah, we know what that place is like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that there's like a tension. There's like like I don't want to go back there. I don't want to go back there. Um, and so like this kind of like protective instinct to make sure you know don't go back to that bottom, let's call it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like that protectiveness, like how is that sort of shaping the experience you're having right now? Like this place you're
Mm.
at, where you're like, okay, like how do I move forward?
I think also it's just I've been feeling this too, where I feel like I'm just pushing forward, looking forward, but not really sitting in the lessons of the past.
Hmm.
Maybe sitting in is the wrong word. Like soaking in, like truly embodying the lessons of the past. Like
Uh-huh.
there's a little bit of an aversion to that. Like intellectually, I know them,
Yeah.
but what it feels to be embodied in them,
Yeah.
that's what I'm avoiding.
Is one of the is an example of embodying it like holding the boundary, saying, "Hey, I'm gonna take care of myself. I'm gonna
Yeah,
let my life be,
yeah,
you know, have other space in my life besides work."
yeah.
Yeah. So
Because
there's
I've
this like,
never done that until now. I've never put that
yeah,
mark in the sand of like, I actually do want to have as a priority
yeah.
my personal life alongside my work life.
So on some level, it sounds like there's like almost as if you are not sure you can trust
Do
yourself to
it.
do it.
Yeah, yeah.
How's that landing for you when I say that?
It resonates.
Okay. Okay. So there's like some element here around like, yeah, it sounds great in theory, Yeah, that lesson that makes a lot of sense. Like hold a boundary, be clear, say no. But
Mhm.
because you haven't seen a lot of real life evidence of you doing that, there's like it sounds like there's like some party that's like, yeah, but are you really going to do it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you trust yourself to do that? That's kind of what I'm picking up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as you say that out loud, what comes back to me is I don't think I've reflected to say these are like my hard and fast boundaries and these are the ones I'm willing to flex on.
Yeah.
And these are the scenarios I'm willing to flex them with.
Yeah.
And in the case that I do get pushed on these boundaries, how do I respond in a way that's like respectful but firm?
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you do it? What does that sound like to you?
Saying no, but in a nice way. um, maybe it's saying no, but giving it an alternative of this is how it could look like, or this is a different, like, here's a different option.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like a renegotiation.
Yeah. So like to make this more tangible,
Yeah.
when I was in my old job, I wanted to take 2 weeks off to travel to Bali to go on a yoga retreat. So 1 week was a yoga retreat. The one before that, I was going to teach myself how to surf.
Mm-hmm.
And when push came to shove, my boss asked me to cancel the first week of my trip because I needed to be in important client meetings. And so I did. And to this day, I kind of regret it because it would have been great to take that time. The yoga retreat was fantastic, but it would have been great to take that time. And so I guess in that scenario, it's saying, no, I'm not willing to do this. The options could be, can we move the important meetings up or back? And or I can have someone fill my spot. And then me personally just needed to be okay with not being in those meetings. Because I did it because I thought that if I was there, it would lead to career advancement. And it would mean that I would get promoted that year. But obviously that didn't happen. And so maybe it's being more clear about that as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and don't get me wrong. There is a risk when you push back, with your boss, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of scenarios where that wouldn't fly, or you might get, some punishment or negative consequence.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that back then you would just say, okay, I'm going to cancel that part of my trip.
Grin and bear it. Yep.
Right. And now it sounds like, if I were to do it over again, I could say, hey, no, it is important for me to take this trip. And here are some other things we can explore to make it work for you too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got this like one example here. Let me check in, like this part of you that doesn't believe you're actually going to go do it. How is that feeling now?
It just started speaking up and saying that I now have 4 years worth of experience running my own company, and arguably the hardest boss is myself. And so
yeah,
I have the tools to be able to communicate when I don't want to do something. It's just listening to myself and honoring myself instead of giving into the pressure.
Well, I love what you just said, because so much of the last 4 years has been dealing with a boss that happens to be you.
Yeah. I'm a terrible boss to myself.
Right, yeah. And so the boss comes in and be like, Danielle, I need you to work on this weekend. I need you to work on this thing. I need you to cancel your plans. I need you to do this, right? So there's something about like the relationship you have with that internal boss, so to speak, that feels salient here, yeah?
Yeah, and she has the voice of my old boss.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's this dynamic, it sounds like, where, well, let me, before I go on, what was your old boss like? Just in a few words.
Very impressive. I admired them a lot. And which is funny that we're talking about this. Work was their life.
Uh-huh.
And there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And they expected everyone around them to also have work be their life.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. And on some level, you like adopted a bit of that when it comes to like your internal boss.
Yeah. I definitely think I adopted some of it into Before Noon in my team, which we've had to work through. and it's most harsh with myself.
Yeah. Yeah. What we're talking about then is just not just on some level, it's your relationship with the internal thought, that internal
Mm-hmm.
voice.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have some awareness on how it runs its life. Like work is everything. No
Yeah.
ifs, ands, or buts. Like no space in my life for that, for anything but that.
Yeah.
So if you can kind of make contact with that voice right now in the present moment, right, the one that's telling you, Danielle, you got to be working more, nothing else matters, right? How do you want to respond to that voice as you hear it?
That I know that not to be true. And that there's a different way.
And so when you're standing in this truth that there, that's not true, work isn't everything.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is like there's some space that is there for something else. What is that something else?
I think that's for me to define. And maybe that's where some of the hesitancy is like I haven't defined it yet.
Ah, okay. Like work has taken up so much of your life that you haven't sort of been in the practice of filling your life with something else.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like I know one way to be true, which is where work takes up 90% of your priority.
You're very good at that.
Very good at that.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the alternative is where it becomes maybe 60-40 instead of 90-10,
Yeah.
and how I would want that to look like.
Mm,
So maybe that's where the anxiety comes in. It's because I don't have a vision for that yet.
mm, yeah. And even on just like a simpler level, um, you haven't gone searching and exploring,
Mm-hmm.
um, because you've been spending so much of your time and energy and attention on work.
Mm-hmm.
Just like your awareness and your cognitive resources haven't been going into other areas. Like what else could this be? Like what are the other
Yeah.
possibilities?
Yeah. Someone recommended that I talk to a strengths finders consultant to
Mm-hmm.
identify like my why behind how I like to work and why I like to work. And
Uh-huh.
resoundingly, it came back that I enjoy being creative.
Mm-hmm.
And above everything else, I'm a creator, and
Mm.
creating space to sit and think and create is important to how I work.
Yeah.
And so I'm taking that and bringing that in because I think that's important as I start to think about how to reconstruct my days and my next opportunity.
Yeah. So what came up for me just now was space for you to create how you work, but also like space for you to create how you live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like you're sort of in
totally.
this space where it's like, okay, like I'm redefining work, but I'm also just sort of redefining my life. I'm
Yeah,
redefining how I structure my days and what I want to do with my energy.
yeah, yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
then
go.
that sounds more exciting. That sounds less anxiety ridden. Sounds more exciting.
Okay. Like I'm gonna hook onto that just a little bit. Like what's
Okay.
let's see if we can rev up the excitement just a little bit. So
Okay.
so all right, so you're stepping into a little bit more possibility, a little bit more excitement. Like what's exciting to you? It's not just work. Like what like you have this like energy, this life force that you want to put into. Like what's sort of drawing you?
I guess freedom to flow through my days instead of it being so like rigid and structured.
Okay.
Um, Thinking up the future of thinking what I want it to be.
No,
So
okay.
instead of just exemplifying what I think it should be, actually taking time to think of like how I would like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Honestly, it feels like breathing room, like time to just be and breathe and enjoy life for once.
Hmm. The word that comes up is spaciousness.
Yeah,
So like you're excited just to have the breathing room, the breathing space, as opposed to just like everything is, super tight and
Ticking time
collapsed.
bomb. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. What's required of you then to create that space or allow that space for you?
Ooh. Financials for sure.
Okay.
Taking pressure off of myself. And I think not that I didn't enjoy my work before noon, but doing work that I enjoy and also living a life that feels fulfilled. So like kind of to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of like feeling connected to my community and my loved ones.
Yeah.
And yeah, not always feeling like I'm letting people down.
Okay, so there's this sort of financial component. Hey, I gotta make sure that house is in order. There is this element around like just uh, connecting with my loved ones, my relationships, not letting people down. I'm wondering if you can just say more about that.
I felt like in the totality of my career, I was always so busy or like told myself I was so busy that I didn't take the time to, I didn't do a great job of like calling people that I love, just staying
Mm,
connected throughout all
mm,
of it.
mm-hmm.
Um, Being present, like I would go to events, but maybe not be as present as I could have been.
Yeah.
Um, like with my partner, especially, he does a great job of celebrating little moments, and I don't think I do that a great job for him in that regard.
Yeah.
So yeah, showing up the way that I would want to show up.
And so like yeah, okay, so you're very well practiced in like not being present in so many situations
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
not reaching out, right? So there's
Yeah.
like is it because we've already talked about this a little bit. Is it your mind is elsewhere because it's on work? I gotta make this thing happen. Is that kind of like the driving force here?
Yeah, like I need to climb the ladder. I need to achieve the next ambitious thing, like achieve, achieve, achieve.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
to yeah.
yeah, so what's on the other end of that achievement? So like, all right,
I
you
think it's
you,
just
you get all the
being.
achievement. No. So
Yeah.
so when you in the
Oh.
anxiety, so like when you finally get the achievement,
Yeah.
what is it that you get to like feel, under that? Like what's the state that you feel like you're chasing by achieving so much?
I guess like status, admiration,
Okay.
glory.
All right, so you get status, you get admiration, you get glory, all right? Like you have all that, and then
Yeah.
what? What do you get to feel
Then it's
then?
the next goal, which is what I learned with Before Noon too. It's like you set a goal, you hit the goal, and then instead of like actually spending time to celebrate it, you're like, okay, next goal to hit. And so it's like
Yeah.
a continual thing.
Yeah, so that what? So you get all the goals, you get all the accolades and the praise, and then underneath all that, what do you like you're chasing something there? What's the thing that you're
Yeah.
trying to feel from that? When you finally get it all done in this world.
You know, the funny thing is, I think it's to prove to myself that I can relax,
Uh-huh. So
to
you,
earn
you
the right to just
yeah.
be content in my days and just to be and flow and
Yeah.
play.
Okay. Great. Yeah, beautiful. So like the game is earn, achieve, get praise, get recognition, win, get the goal, get the next goal, get the next goal, get the next goal, get the next goal, so that now you get to relax, and
Yeah.
then you get to be content,
Yeah.
and you get to flow and play,
Uh-huh.
right? So, yeah, just like as we're just describing this,
Yeah.
right? Like, you know, I guess the question then, especially as we're starting to come wrap this up in a few
Mm-hmm.
minutes, like the question is, how do you start to allow yourself to access all of that without having to get to the next goal, without having to worry about the next thing that you have to do, but instead just
Yeah.
allowing all that in?
I mean, I think it's everything that we talked about. I think the experience before noon did teach me that one achievement is going to lead to like the next goal and the next goal, but there's a way to just bring those two together and create more of a well-rounded life versus like I'll put everything off, all the enjoyment off in life until I achieve enough, whatever enough is, because it changes every time.
Right. You can see how that's a trap, yeah?
Yeah. And I think maybe just having that perspective is helpful to now say, like, I know why I want to put the boundary in place, like why I'm willing to say no to canceling part of my vacation. There's an alternative to the career advancement. Like you can advance your career or like you can also advance your life. And so I think this time I'm choosing advancing me in my life.
Yeah.
And that's helpful. That's super helpful because I think it puts the line, that's the line in the sand, and that's the vision, and that's the goal.
Yeah. And what I don't hear you saying is screw my career, screw everyone else. Like I hear you saying like, hey, I can negotiate with the people around me. I can find creative solutions to make it work. Right. So that this is still, this sort of respectful relationship and exchange. And I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my ability to relax, to feel contentment, to feel joy, to feel play. Yeah. Without needing to kind of be on the endless, like, goal winning hamster wheel that like underneath that we believe once we finally end that, then we can rest.
Yeah. I think it's like I'm choosing myself full stop, and myself is feeling fulfilled in my career and feeling fulfilled in my life. It's both of those things, not just one or the other.
Right. Yeah.
This has been super helpful.
Thank you. No, wonderful. So it's just like we're starting to wrap here. Like, let me just ask you, Danielle, like, if you're just reflecting back on this conversation and what you want to kind of remind yourself of afterwards and how you want to move it forward, what's coming up for you?
I think it's recognizing the anxiety and then actually taking time to sit in it and parse through it, because through that thread is how we got to the end here of, like, for me, choosing myself is both of those components. And just by saying no or putting up a boundary, it doesn't mean I'm limiting my opportunities. It means that I'm choosing myself, which is much more empowering. Yeah. Time to make friends with the anxiety then. Let, notice when it's up there. Good old friend.
Yeah. I don't think it really goes away most of the time. It's just more that we find new ways to relate to it.
Yeah. And I think I like avoiding it as my first line of defense. And so when I start to feel that, it's getting curious.
Right. Yeah. Avoidance and the resistance versus the moving toward. It's like there's a huge difference there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Danielle, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. There was a key moment in the session where Danielle said that she was achieving and winning so that she could earn the right to relax, to rest, to play, to be content. As we achieve one goal, we're convinced that we must get to the next, perpetually putting off our enjoyment of life under the illusion that eventually we will have achieved enough to earn the life that we want. But once Danielle saw that this was a trap, she also saw that she could choose herself, choose the life that she wants, and then figure out what career looks like within that. I hope that by listening to this conversation, you see through the achievement trap. You see the illusion for what it is. There's no amount of achievement that can create long-lasting eternal happiness. Ultimately, the key is for you to define what a satisfying life looks like and to live it each and every day. Forget about scoring the winning point and then going home with the trophy. You'll still have to figure out what to do with yourself. Play the games that inherently bring you joy, and the rest will take care of itself. Thank you for listening to Slow Down to Speed Up. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate it in your favorite podcasting app. If you are a founder who would like help in reaching the next level through coaching, or if you'd like to come on the show, please contact me at dashingleadership.com.